We'll tell you about the main news at 9 a.m. this Friday on TSN. We look forward to your comments on the broadcast and would appreciate your subscription. Last night, there was a massive Shahed drone attack in Dnipro. 15 were shot down. There were hits on an industrial facility and fires broke out. 2 districts, Dnipropetrovsk region, enemy fire. Occupiers, drones and artillery. Private house fire, 2-story building and car damaged. The number of people wounded as a result of the Russian attack on humanitarian demining mission representatives in Chernihiv region has risen to 5. 2 people were killed. A missile strike was carried out. The Russians struck the Kyselivka community the day before. The dead and wounded are deminers from the humanitarian mission of the Danish Refugee Council, according to the military administration. At the same time, the Ministry of Defense of the occupiers, they posted a video and claimed that it was the Russian army that struck with an Iskander missile, allegedly targeting vehicles equipped with Ukrainian armed forces strike UAV systems. Although there isn't a single drone visible in the footage, the head of the Chernihiv military administration, Vyacheslav Chaus, called this latest Russian attack another act of senseless terror. Because in reality, despite Russian claims, they targeted those who are helping to overcome the consequences of the war. A humanitarian mission for demining territories. Sumy and its surrounding district were partially without electricity due to a Russian drone attack. 3 water intakes in the city have lost power and have been switched to emergency backup supply. Water is being supplied according to a schedule and with reduced pressure. Trolley buses are also not running. Energy workers are working to restore power, as there were strikes on critical infrastructure and industrial facilities. Fires that broke out as a result of the strikes have been extinguished. During the downing of an enemy drone, debris injured a local resident. On the front line over the past day, the enemy advanced near 3 settlements in different directions. This was reported by the analytical portal Deep State. This concerns positions in the Kharkiv, Donetsk, and Zaporizhzhia regions. The situation remains most difficult in the Pokrovsk direction. The occupiers are trying to regain control of the village of Novoekonomikne, which lies on the road to Mirnohrad. Our troops liberated it just a few days ago. But the main fighting in the Zaraz direction is happening right there. In addition, the enemy is seeking to approach Pokrovsk from the southwest direction, specifically from the village of Shevchenko. The fighting for the settlement continues, Udakne, which our troops control. The situation is difficult on the approaches to Dnipropetrovsk region. Our forces pushed the enemy out of Tovste. However, the fighting for it is still ongoing. Overall, since the beginning of the day, there have been more than 50 clashes and Russian attacks on the front. The defense forces are repelling them even as we speak. A coalition of willing countries will supply Ukraine with long-range missiles. This was announced by the UK government following the summit in Paris. More than 30 countries are ready to guarantee our security after the current war ends. And not just from Europe. The details and the specific ways were discussed at a hybrid meeting at the Elysee Palace. Volodymyr Zelensky was present in person. And after the discussions, members of the coalition who were interested called Donald Trump, who is ready to contribute and in what way. Zoriana Stepanenko from Radio Liberty will tell us more.
Discussions about security guarantees for Ukraine have revived in recent weeks. This happened after a group of European leaders traveled to Washington. Donald Trump, after receiving them, announced that the United States was also ready to work to ensure that attacks on Ukraine would not happen again. This is what spurred progress. Within the so-called Coalition of the Willing, there was a surge of enthusiasm. Today, it gathered a record number of participants, 3.5 Emmanuel Macron announced the completion of preparatory work on security guarantees. The French president, following the meeting, stated that 26 countries are ready to participate in the Deterrence Force project. Radio Liberty learned from informed sources in diplomatic circles of EU and NATO countries that more than 20 out of the 30 coalition member states are generally willing to strengthen Ukraine's defense capabilities. For example, there is an agreement that the coalition will supply Ukraine with long-range missiles. Ukraine's own army has been and remains considered the key guarantee of the country's security. This is the so-called first line of defense. Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, likes to use the comparison to a steel porcupine. It is believed to be armed to the teeth. A Ukraine with a strong military will be able to handle aggression.
The main elements, they understood. A strong Ukrainian army, domestic production, European production, which I mentioned, needs to be expanded. It is also very important for strengthening Ukraine, as well as the distinct possibility and various extensive programs for procuring scarce and essential weapons, primarily crucial air defense and vital anti-ballistic missiles from the United States. These are the absolutely key elements for strengthening our army. Real protection from our partners truly involves a multi-component infrastructure, and above all, it certainly means presence. We have agreed that there will be a continued presence. For now, I'm not ready to specify the numbers, although, to be honest, we are already sharing this information among ourselves. We have a rough idea of how many have already agreed. And as I said, the presence varies. It is in the air, at sea, and on land.
Out of about 20 countries willing to strengthen Ukraine, only half 10 are ready to send troops there once peace is established. At least that's the figure cited by Radio Liberty's sources in diplomatic circles. These are EU and NATO countries, and the roles for these deterrence forces have already been outlined. Turkey will play a leading role in maritime security. France, the United Kingdom, and countries from the North Baltic region will take responsibility for the land component. Preliminarily, its deployment location will be Western Ukraine, and therefore it is agreed that the skies above it must be protected. The exact method still needs to be agreed upon. According to preliminary estimates, a total of up to 30,000 troops may be involved in this mission, that is, in the deterrence forces. Up to 30,000 military personnel may be included. However, this number may still change once answers are found to all the questions that currently remain unresolved.
We have just held talks with President Trump. In the coming days, we will summarize the American support. As I said, the United States has been involved at every stage of this process, both civilian and military. In the coming days, we will clarify this further. But it is clear that Canada, partners from Asia, and Europeans will also join the guarantees.
The key question remains: how will Western forces act in the event of potential aggression from Russia? For example, should Russian aircraft be shot down if they enter the airspace over a foreign mission? And although, as coalition members state, there has already been significant progress in developing security guarantees, there is still a long way to go. There is still much ahead. The same applies to the ceasefire, which is a mandatory prerequisite for deploying the mission, and still seems like a distant prospect. Russia, Zelensky summarized, is not interested in ending the war. And if this continues, Macron in turn announced new sanctions. From Brussels, Zoriana Stepanenko, Marek Hajduk, Radio Svoboda, especially for TSN 1+1.
Criminal liability is being reinstated in Ukraine for military personnel for unauthorized abandonment of their unit. The relevant draft law was adopted by Parliament in the first reading. Courts will no longer be able to apply the mitigating provision that had been in effect since November of last year. Servicemen could return from unauthorized absence through a simplified procedure. This allowed them to avoid criminal liability and continue their service with the reinstatement of monetary payments. Currently, you can be imprisoned for up to 10 years for seditious behavior. However, the military still has a chance to avoid punishment for this crime until the law is passed in its entirety, the deputy explains. Alexander Fedienko.
Anyone who, at the time of the adoption of this law, turned to the investigative bodies or to the commanders with documents, we say from there, about a person who voluntarily left the unit, but at the stage of the adoption of the law, nevertheless, his documents are under consideration, he will be exempted from criminal liability.
The sessions of the Verkhovna Rada will again be broadcast live. 266 members of parliament voted for the resolution. Restrictions on live broadcasts have been in effect for the past 3.5 years. Since the moment of the full-scale invasion of Russian troops into Ukraine, the broadcasts were stopped due to the military threat. Journalists also did not have access to the Verkhovna Rada buildings. They were allowed in again starting in May 2024, but only to the third-floor lobby. As of today, deputies have also lifted the embargo on news from Parliament. Media representatives could only report on events in the Rada an hour after the session ended. Now this requirement has been removed. Live broadcasts from Parliament will begin next plenary week on the Rada TV channel.
Our Parliament truly demonstrated its remarkable capability during the most difficult moments when the enemy was just 30 kilometers from the capital, diligently gathering and making the most important decisions by broad consensus. We need to inform people about our activities, about the activities of the Verkhovna Rada. Unfortunately, the general public knows considerably less than we would ideally like, and we truly have absolutely nothing whatsoever to conceal.
You are watching TSN. To stay up to date with the main news, subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell icon. Will I continue with the news broadcast? The water crisis continues in the occupied Donetsk region. Along with fights and neighborly conflicts, water looters have now appeared in the city. They arrive by car and pump out the precious liquid from street barrels wherever there is any. City residents can collect water for their needs. Donetsk residents complain that unknown individuals have stolen at least 10 tons of water this way. So now they secure the containers with padlocks. And locals are being asked to take photos of those who steal water.
People started complaining to us that water trucks are coming. They hook up a hose, a tank, and just suck the water out for themselves. From one tank, then another. We have to remember this method, knowing it's not very reliable, but at least it's some measure of protection against these water looters.
The scandalous former head of the Khmelnytskyi MSK, Tetyana Krupa, was released on bail of 20 million hryvnias. She was released from custody by the High Anti-Corruption Court. Law enforcement officers exposed the then regional head of the Medical and Social Expert Commission last October. Krupa and her son, who headed the regional pension fund, were searched. The family was found to have over $6 million and lists of draft dodgers with fake diagnoses. Tetyana Krupa kept $100,000 right at her workplace and the rest at home. During the investigative actions, the official tried to get rid of part of the money by throwing 2 bags out the window. Those bags contained $500,000. Officially, Nabu suspects her of illegal enrichment amounting to 137 million hryvnias. Almost a year ago, the Pechersk District Court of the capital sent the former official to jail with the possibility of bail set at just over $500 million hryvnias. And while Krupa was in the pre-trial detention center, her lawyers tried to reduce the bail amount so she could be released. And they succeeded. The current amount is 25 times less than the original sum. At the High Anti-Corruption Court, they say the suspect spent 11 months in custody, and she can be held there during the pre-trial investigation for no more than a year. Tetyana Krupa's lawyers are not answering TCH's phone calls. In Lutsk, military personnel were refused accommodation. This happened at a hotel on the outskirts of the city. The incident was reported on Facebook by serviceman Yaroslav Nezik. Together with his comrade, they were on a business trip and stopped in Lutsk for the night. An employee of the establishment refused to accommodate them. So, in the middle of the night, the defenders had to look for another place to stay. The story quickly went viral on social media, and Tetyana Krupa knows how the establishment is commenting on it.
This very post by serviceman Yaroslav just stirred up the internet. 2 defenders were refused accommodation at a hotel in Lutsk.
No, I don't want to. We don't accommodate military personnel.
I never encountered such hatred and contempt even in Donbass.
According to the soldier, that's exactly how the employee of the establishment responded to him. The servicemen who were coming from the front and had been on the road all day did not expect such a reception. Together with his comrade, Yaroslav had to look for another place in the middle of the night, and in the morning they set off on their journey. Yaroslav recounts over the phone how everything happened that night. He says that at first the woman slightly ignored his questions and then silently looked him up and down carefully.
With such an intense and scrutinizing look that I honestly and truly thought there was something seriously wrong with my entire uniform.
And when the soldiers said they were tired and coming from the front, she then gave a clear answer. She said,
"No, they actually don't accommodate soldiers. They had a bit of an incident with the military, some sort of..."
Before, the administrator of the establishment where this happened assures that there have been no incidents with the military so far. No military incidents.
She says everything is calm, quiet, and normal. And no, she didn't say a single word about the situation that happened late in the evening. Right before the cafe was closing, the military arrived and she didn't let them stay.
So the woman found out about what happened from social media. I
am truly horrified, shocked. I just can't pull myself together at all. I was simply astonished, couldn't believe she could say something like that.
The employee, who was already of retirement age and had worked at the establishment for several years, was fired after the incident became public. TSN tried to reach the woman by phone to find out why she didn't want to accommodate the soldiers. However, she never picked up the phone. The serviceman's post gained significant attention. There are hundreds of comments under it, and more than 2,500 shares.
How is this possible? I'm shocked. It's a disgrace. This is terrible. I'm at a loss for words. Thank you sincerely for your protection.
There is also an apology from the director in the comments. She says she tried to contact the serviceman.
1,000 apologies. I don't even know how. I can't find the words to say to Mr. Yaroslav. The help should come from our side. I want to say I apologize to the people of Lutsk, to the servicemen, to everyone for this human error.
Yaroslav, on his way to the front, explained to us over the phone he wrote that post not for apologies, but so such situations would not happen again, neither to him nor his fellow soldiers. Tetyana Krupa, Anton Onishchuk, Lutsk, TSN 1+1.
Giorgio Armani, the legendary Italian fashion designer, has died. For several months, the 91-year-old Armani was receiving treatment at home after a hospitalization that had been kept secret. In 1975, together with his esteemed partner Sergio Galeotti, the renowned designer successfully launched his very first men's ready-to-wear line, and just 1 year later, a remarkably similar women's collection was also introduced under his own prestigious brand, Giorgio Armani. Since then, it has become one of the most prestigious fashion houses in the world. According to the publication, in his final days, La Repubblica writes, he spent them as he always dreamed, at work. Even from his hospital bed and during recovery, he managed the shows remotely, closely supervised the model's looks, and remained meticulous about every detail. A yacht with an underwater view, or the most expensive way to experience it? Life jackets. Social media users are poking fun at a yacht worth about $1 million that sank in Turkey. On the 15th minute of its very first voyage, footage has appeared online showing the owner, the captain, and 2 crew members escaping from the Dolce Vento by jumping overboard. Everyone safely made it to shore, so nothing but wallets and dignity were harmed during the incident. At this moment, that was the latest update. Don't miss our upcoming TSN broadcast to stay informed about the latest events.